I was born here May 24th, 1940. We never went hungry because Dad was such a good hunter. All the men up here at the time were good hunters. And we didn't have a road per se to go to Shuby. They used to use brown flat. And that's how they got through. And they had like a wagon, horse buggy, but I think it was more or less for wood. But there was about 5 farms, I think, up here when they bought it from the government. There was the McDonald's way up on Tough Street, Joe Sachs, I don't know who lives there about now. He was in Tough Street too. And yeah, that would be Helen, no, Madeline Knockwood, but she was married to him, Aunt Madeleine Knockwood, and she had run the farm. The other farm had Uncle Billy Sack had a farm.
Okay, he was by the ball field, right?
Yes, yeah. And then another, our grandmother had a.
Where was her farm at?
Down where Jim Maloney's house is now.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where we lived. We lived up here up here, and Steve Maloney lived right next door where Ruby's living now. But and after war, Dad went to war and he was prisoner of war. Then him and Uncle Laurie, and they came home, and the VA gave him 3 acres of land and built a house, but it was more or less just a shell. And rooms were petitioned off, but there was no sheetrock or anything on them yet. We had to wait till they would get enough money to do it, but Dad never did get any money. He got to pay. One time they said, Ernie, you got to pay, and he went up. It was 10 cents. He said, hold that until I get another 10 cents. So, as poor as we were, everybody had a garden. You had all your vegetables, and they dug holes in the cellars. There was no cement, and they would get hay, and they made like a root cellar. And then we'd have that. When Mom needed vegetables, she'd tell them go down and get this, bring this up, bring that, bring some potatoes up. But and then we'd get a couple of pigs, and then he'd slaughter them in the fall, and he had barrels that we would get sea salt, and then we would salt them for the winter. And a lot of our meat was done up that way. But so we could, Mom would say, go down in the basement, get this, get that. And we would pick raspberries and blackberries, and Mom would make jam out of them. And in the basement we had shelves where you couldn't go down and get them, you couldn't just go and get them. But every now and then she would say, okay, bring up blueberry jam, or go bring this up. And then Dad used to worked on the government truck with Charlie Crow from Stewiacke. And he could get barrels of apples real cheap. A lot of people used to go and buy the apples real cheap. And what they would do is they'd cook them up and boil them. And what they would do, the elders would, a lot of them would go to the dumps and pick bottles and then bring them home and sterilize them. And that's how they preserved. And they would buy wax and melt wax to put wax on top. But there was no sugar or anything put in them. That was just all natural. So we were all healthy. We were all healthy. I remember the elders going down on a wagon. 4, 5, 6 women go down on a wagon on the back,
Where did they go?
She'll eat or shop, and then come back. So they would buy a soup bowl. They would buy little stew meat, but they used to give them the soup bone, because they were throwing them away. So they give them to Indian. So if my mother bought the soup bone, oh boy, we had a good stew this week, because then it went over to Aunt Mary, and then it went over to Isaac Mark, and then Aunt Tilly, and then back to us. So we had a good soup this week, but next week we're going to get the bottom of the line. You know? But next week, every week your soup kept getting better and better until it was your turn to buy it. You know, and the men would take all of the bones. We never threw bones away, like moose bones, you know, moose meat, deer meat. They were all sawed and cooked for broth and stuff like that. And I remember going out, getting up early in the morning, going out and picking mushrooms. And then sometime what are we going to have for vegetables, Mom? She said, well, we can have dandelion greens if you go pick them. All right. A lot of us were taken away, we sent to residential school, you know. That was hard on I think that was the hardest part on us at that time. And it wasn't brought because of the people or our customs. It was them trying to put something else on us, taking our language away from us. And the other thing was then we couldn't speak Mi'kmaq. So when we come home, they were trying to make white people out of us. And when we come home, the Indian kids would pick on us because now we couldn't speak Mi'kmaq. So you know that was hard. I think that was the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you
If
made
you
friends.
didn't grow up on the reserve and you came back,
Yeah.
you were shunned by the people on the reserve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that was.
When you
That's
first
when-
come back. I felt that when I first came back home too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I first moved home.
Yeah. Even now they come. The people ask me, "Are you moving home?" No. Left here in 1959. Arrived in Boston August 24th, 1959. Rita she said, wait for me. She had Edgar. We took a train. At that time, you take a train in Truro. You changed in St. John, then you changed in Bangor, and that Bangor train took you right to Boston. My mother was in a residential school when it first opened. I don't know how long though, she didn't say how long, but she said she was there. And she got in a lot of trouble because she wasn't afraid to speak up, and that was Bride. That was my mother. She'd tell you what she felt like. She didn't care how big you were. Little but loud, poor but proud. So yeah, but yeah, she really, you know, the women had it really hard, you know, because we didn't have washing machines. We you know, we had to get water, and then you have to heat your water, and you know, it had to be hard on her. And we big family, you know, and then she had Grammy helping her. Then when Gram passed away, it was like, all right, you're on your own, you know, yeah. And they having all the kids and probably, you know, worrying about how you're going to feed them and clothe them, and it had to be because Dad, what money he made, as fast as he made it, the community store, Mom would use it up, you know, go up there and get, she called it bistam, you know, a little piece of meat and some veggies and whatever, you know, and make a big meal out of it. She was a good, calm person. She was like our safe haven.
What was her name? Nancy Elizabeth?
Nancy.
Elizabeth Nancy.
No, Nancy. Her name was Nancy. See, my grandmother on my dad's side, her name was Elizabeth. So Dad wanted Nancy. Dad wanted Nancy named Elizabeth Nancy. And Mama wanted Nancy Elizabeth. And then Dad went and got some homemade brew and was back in the woods with the guys, and Mom went and had her baptized and baptized her Nancy Elizabeth. Yeah, but my grandmother, she was just so jolly and everything else. She was like the monarch of the Maloney family. What she said, you listened. But I remember Mum said, I'm living up here and I had an earache, and Mum sent me down, hollered out, and Grandma came to the door down there and she said, she told her she was sending me down, and I'd walk through the field, you know. But Grammy had a well. See, the the farms had wells. So she had a well, and then, so she make sure I didn't go near it. But I went down, she had a man-made little ladder, they all had man-made ladders, and she helped me down her root cellar, and then she told me to go in the corner and get the butter, and I got butter, and I gave it to her. She said, you wait there. She cut a piece off, and then she wrapped it again. She said, okay, put it back, and then she helped me out, and then she closed the trap door. They had a door that went on the floor, and then they had another door. And then she heated that up in a spoon, and she made me lay on the bed with my head on her lap. And she poured half of that down one ear, and then she poured the other half down the other. And I never had an earache the rest of my life. Gone. But she was good at Indian medicine. You know, even today I follow some of that. You know, the old people, they got together, and they were good at saving up little money, and they would send a couple of people to Halifax, and they would go to the firehouse, because the firehouse used to get donated clothes, and they would bring home sweaters, knitted sweaters, and material, and whatever, and they'd bring them home, and they would cut the material down and make pants or make coats or whatever for us. But we all learned to knit. If you didn't learn to knit, you were out. We had you'd be given a sweater, then you had to take that sweater apart and roll it, and then you sewed you knitted your stockings, your gloves, your hat, and your scarf.
Even the boys did.
Even the boys
Yeah,
did.
the boys had.
And matter of fact, my brother Gordy, when his kids were in Boston, he'd go down and get yarn, and he could make them needles sing. And so you know, everybody. So that's what they did, and what they would do, they would get some material, and they would make clothing and stuff like that, so they could would help them when they were going like to sell their Indian crafts and whatever. They would send a couple. Okay, this month you three go. You know, this month, next 6 weeks you three go. But they knitted and made things, and they put them up in the community store, and people could buy them. But that money went for the good of all of the women, you know, because they,
Nice.
yeah, and that's how they shared things like that. Somebody didn't go without, you know. You wouldn't see somebody next door with no food, you know. Dad would come home and he'd have a moose, and of course Uncle Steve and Uncle Shorty, everybody got a piece of that, you know. And then somebody else go in and get it was him, then he'd share too, you know. So there was no, it wasn't, they didn't hoard it and say, oh, it's mine, and don't come over here, and you know, there was none of that. It was really, it was like we were one big family. We had rules too, but at that time, if I got in trouble, wherever I got in trouble, and who's caught me doing trouble, they punished me, and then they sent word to Mom and Dad that I was being corrected, and there was no fights over it or anything like that, you know, because I know that happened to me.
Well, she reminded me when you're bad. She was telling me about this time up at the graveyard. they didn't have a sled or anything to go coast them with, and they took the crosses. Her and her best friend Yvonne. Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, well, only a couple of people, you know, like the Whiteleys and uh, Steve Maloney, because your grandfather, he had like a car and it was a taxi, he called it his taxi. Well, they had sleighs, but they, you know, they had toboggan. We didn't have that. So anyway, Annie Mae Brooks and I, we got in, we seen them crosses, so we sit on the cross and we coast down Brown Flats. And if we went home with everybody else, we would have been all right, but we had to go one more time. And when we come up, Bill Duncan shined his light on us. And he made us put them back, but then he said, oh, when you were in there, you probably bumped against this cross, or you bumped against that one. And he made us straighten all them crosses out. Well, now we're up there straightening that cross out. Well, we never took that cross and went skating again. That's coasting again. No, sir. But the thing about it too, it was, I'm talking about Bill Duncan. He, in the old days, they respected elders to a T. I mean, yeah, you couldn't say nothing about bad to the elders. And you know what? They just made him the constable. A group of men got together, made him a constable, right? And you know, he carried a stick, but he never used it, you know? He never had a gun or nothing. But if he heard you fighting or anyone fight, he'd go there and he'd scold them, and everybody would stop and everybody would go their way, you know. But it was that's how much they respected elders, or what an elder said.